So, next up, I'm very happy to welcome someone from SAP. We had people from SAP before at the Digitale Leute Summit, but I'm happy to welcome Itamar Medeiros, VP Design Strategy SAP. A big applause, please. So Itamar, thank you very much for being with us. I'm really looking forward what you do with the jobs to be done method. And yeah, the stage is yours. Go ahead, thank you.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm here to talk about some transformation that we're trying to go through at SAP when we are trying to be more outcome-based roadmaps, right? So, but I guess, let's say some of you probably read like Marty Kagan, Empowered, and you probably read like, hey, but roadmaps are bad, right? And I think he would agree, but I think, yeah. So roadmaps are bad, and the example I think that, let's say, if we were to stick to Marty Kagan's definition, I think what he's talking about is this kind of roadmap where you have like a laundry list of features, and you don't have, or at least you're not able to verbalize to the teams, like what is your theory about how any of these features are going to deliver value to the customers or to your business and so on, right? So what I've experienced with many teams that I coach is that basically these roadmaps are not really roadmaps. They are more like project plans, like Gantt charts of project plans. Like if we deliver, like we are planning to deliver this feature by this date, right? It might be, and I'm trying not to be so critical of the people that do the planning in these organizations, right? But if you don't have a strong theory or hypothesis on how each of these features contributes to the bottom line, you might run into the danger of what Thomas Choron calls like perfectly executing the wrong plan, right? Where you deliver something and it's kind of hard to tell, did it change anything, right? Did we achieve any of our business marks, right? So if you can remember anything from our, if you can't remember anything from this call, just think about these three things, right? If we shift from these feature-centric roadmaps to something that's more outcome-based, you're going to create products that truly resonate with people. And by collaborating with stakeholders in the process of creating these roadmaps, you're going to break down the silos and generate the alignment with your teams. And I'm using here the word stakeholder in a very broad term. I think people tend to, in my mind, or at least my observation, people tend to think of stakeholders as like managing up. But I think people tend to forget that the people that consume your strategy, they are your stakeholders too, right? The people that are actually going to execute on the plan, they need to be involved, right? So that's the picture I'm going to make here today. And finally, and this is where I think my contribution and where this conversation starts, is how jobs to be done could be an easy way to get to these outcome-based roadmaps, right? So for the purpose of this conversation here, I'm calling roadmap a communication tool, not a planning tool, right? So the way that I've been trying to at least reposition the roadmaps in the area of my influence is that the roadmap is going to be able to tell you like the rationale why we made these choices. Like, for example, why we're playing in this market, why we're going for this kind of opportunity, and so on, right? And basically creates the alignment on like what are the problems, like how do you translate your vision into the features, and the alignment in terms of like what are the problems we're trying to solve here. And here's the critique that I make to a lot of organizations, right? Sometimes people have a hard time doing this kind of like outcome-based roadmaps or any kind of planning that is outcome-based, because, and this is kind of the inconvenient conversation to be had, is like they don't really have a vision, right? They don't know what the outcome that we're trying to achieve. We have like general goals like, oh, increase adoption by 5% or increase revenue by 10%, but there's no theory about how we're going to do that, right? Or there's no vision for it, right? So people can jump really quickly from, let's say, release planning. So in the kind of work that I do, I operate a lot in the left side of the picture here. In every company, I think, let's say, there's like hundreds of versions of the double diamond, and I don't want to go into the details of like how we do it at SAP, because like basically each part of SAP has its own kind of development method. But there is an aspect of ensuring, like, what is the minimum amount of alignment and discussion that we need to have in order to make sure that we're doing the right things, right? And this can be very tricky, because some people look at something like this and think like, oh, then we're doing kind of waterfall. We're doing like all the planning up front. And what I'm going to try to advocate here is like, it's not about doing all this big bang planning. It's more like generating the vision and clarifying like what is the choices and the strategies, so that when people go into the execution, it should be clear, right? Let's say it's like if you're in the middle of the sprint and then people are scratching their heads like, but what is the job to be done that we should be working here, right? So that means like it's just friction that's going to come later. So with that in mind, this is what I'm going to try to propose to you here in terms of like why I would create a roadmap. Basically, it's these three things, right? Strategic alignment, as in creating the clarity on like what are the problems, like what is your vision, what are the problems you're trying to solve. And if you create that clarity, then you're going to generate, like it's going to become easier to prioritize things. And here's my observation in working with a lot of teams. It's usually not for the lack of ideas that people don't innovate or they don't create value. Most of the times it's because they get stuck on these endless debates like, we should do that feature or that feature, right? So there's no shared vision or no shared understanding of what are the problems we're trying to solve. So basically now people keep just, when it gets to that part of prioritization, everybody has an opinion on which feature should go first, right? So with this clarity and alignment in terms of vision and problems to be solved, some of these decisions around prioritization, they kind of make themselves. It sounds a bit optimistic, but I've seen this at play, right? And the final reason why you should do this roadmaps, at least the way that I'm proposing here, is that then you generate these enhanced buy-in. So let's look at each piece, right? As I said, for the 25 years that I've been doing this, the more that you create shared understanding on what are the problems you're trying to solve, the less friction you get when it comes to decision making, right? One of the concepts I'm going to talk in here today is this idea, like I'm going to touch really briefly on this managing by outcomes approach to working with teams. And one of the core principles of managing by outcomes is generating this strategic alignment, right? So for that to happen, we need to kind of look at the roadmaps differently, right? Like you kind of have to decouple the roadmap from the plan, right? As in, like, if there's an expectation that we get this feature by this date, you get that from a plan, right? But if you try to do both, if you try to do, let's say, okay, we need to achieve this much outcome by this date, this is where I guess, let's say, Marty Kagan and the others will have a problem with this kind of roadmap, right? But if all of a sudden, if the team commits to an outcome, and then they are empowered and they have the flexibility to pivot and twist and turns on the actual delivery of specific features, then all of a sudden the organization becomes a lot more agile, right? So from that perspective, a roadmap is not a release plan. You're still going to have release plans. You still need them. We still, like people, I guess, in most organizations, you still need to be accountable for, like what are the hours that people, like what are the hours that people are spending, where they're spending all this kind of stuff, right? But that's not what these roadmaps should be for, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people jump too fast from like the vision to the roadmap. And if I could be very honest, like sometimes people don't even have the vision. Like they just go straight to like planning, right? That in my mind, that's a even more systemic problem to solve. But what are we talking about outcomes? Like if we're gonna adopt this outcome, like the best definition that I've seen is by my friend Josh Schweiden, right? Let's say the outcome is a measurable change in human behavior that's going to drive the business impact, right? So if you deliver a feature, you can cross off from your release plan, but if that feature didn't change a behavior on your, like whatever is the target audience that you have intended for, in a way that drives the business impact that you needed to create, then basically you're not creating value for anyone, right? Or at least definitely not for your company, right? So basically the three things that you need to ask yourself from that perspective is like, what are the changes in human behavior that's going to drive business results? What can we do to make more of that happen? And how we know that we are right? Right? So Teresa Toys talks about these three kinds of outcomes. Actually, she talks about these two, right? So there's the business impact, as in what does your employer want, like how is your employer going to like pay your salary in the end of the month is by achieving some goals, right? Revenue, growth, customer satisfaction. The reality is, I would be interested to talk to you if you do have any influence on that side. Most of the times, like there's some high-level goals that are set up from top down at that level, right? There's some expectation. This side of the picture, most teams should know what they are, right? Say, what is the jobs to be done that our product is trying to help people achieve? If you don't know that, then there's like tools, right? Jobs to be done being one of them. But the way I would see like a very customer-centric organization is that the team has the tools, the skills, and the empowerment to discover all of this, right? Like they should know like what are the jobs that people are trying to get done through your application. We're going to get that to a second, right? And then the product outcomes are exactly these things. Like, well, if customers are trying to do this and our business is expecting us to achieve that, then what are the changes in the behavior of our customers that we can do that drive the change, right? So let me give a couple examples. So let's say the business is expecting adoption to increase by 5%, right? Or something else like churn rate reduces by 10%. The example here is like as SAP SuccessFactors, we have a lot of like we're trying to run the operations of the HR department, right? So a product like learning. Let's say, by the way, I guess some of you might even be using our product in that case. Is like if you have to go through corporate training, compliance training, and so on, you might have to do like take classes or trainings, right? So the example here are two jobs to be done, right? So the first one, when choosing which courses to take, I want to access personalized training, right? So this is like these are just examples of things like that. Usually a product will have dozens, maybe hundreds of jobs to be done, right? Or the other example, like choosing which courses to take, I want recommendations of courses to match my learning style. Well, if I know all these jobs, maybe I could come up with hypotheses, and this is like a two-way conversation here, where the team can come together with leadership and say, okay, I think if we were to let customers choose a path that is personalized to their career goals, we might increase the completion of voluntary trainings, right? Which that in turn might increase adoption, right? So this kind of approach, and this is something I think that Roger Martin talks a lot about, is like, this is just a theory, and this is kind of the biggest mindset shift that people have to adopt when you're thinking about strategy, is like, you cannot prove up front. You can only come up with a theory or a hypothesis that this is going to work, and then you need to find a way to learn if this is working as quick as, as fast as possible. Like, what are some, like, in that sense, you could think that this, like, if you're in the analytics kind of space, you think that maybe this is a leading indicator to this one, right? So if we were to increase the increase the completion of voluntary trainings, the hypothesis is that we will increase adoption by 5%. If that doesn't work, then what can we do? What can we pivot? It's very different than delivering a feature. Right? Say we delivered this feature, but if the adoption didn't increase, then there's no way to tell like why our hypotheses were true or not. So when you adopt, and by the way, I'm going to talk a bit about jobs to be done. I heard from some people that I talked to in this conference that the method itself is already a bit well known. So I'm not going to cover in detail the method. So I'm just going to explain really quickly, right? So, in this jobs to be done way of looking at things, which by the way, I think Tony Uwick and others coined this term, jobs to be done. But the easiest way to go back and sell this to, let's say, to your organization is just call jobs to be done desired outcomes, right? So then I'm going to be using this word interchangeably, jobs to be done and customer outcomes, right? So companies they really need to understand like what are the outcomes that their customers and users are trying to achieve, then figure out the technology that's going to solve this, right? From the jobs to be done perspective, from this, if you embrace that theory, what happens is that people don't buy technology for the sake of technology, right? They will only switch to the next technology if that thing allows them to do a job faster, cheaper, more conveniently, right? Perfect example is music, right? Like then there was like the gramophone, and then like LPs, and then cassette tapes, and then CDs, and so on. Each technology, people just don't adopt the next one just because there's a list of there's a specification with the features like, oh yeah, I'm going to adopt CDs now because they have higher quality. Some of these things are very subjective. Customers adopt it because like, oh, now CDs, I can put it into I can have more of them in a smaller space. So for example, if you think about cassette tapes, the quality of cassettes is arguably lower than LPs, but I can put it into a Walkman, put it on my pocket and carry along, right? MP3 is the same thing. If you think about it, some of these technology jumps, the quality is degrading, but it allows people to do other things. Like for example, MP3, not only I can put it in my pocket like the Walkman, but now I can have like 1,000. That was the whole business proposition of the iPod. I can put 1,000 songs in my pocket, right? So let's talk about how we are using jobs to be done. I mean, we're not trying to create like a SAP's version of jobs to be done. I'm just going to go through the theory here really quick. But if you're not familiar with the methodology, it all comes from this idea that people don't want your tool. They want what the tool allows them to do, right? People don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. So if you take that thinking to the next step, actually people don't even care about the hole in the wall. What they want to do is like maybe hang a picture on the wall. And this is from a marketing perspective, that's what people have in mind when they're comparing your product with something else, right? Yes, a bit driller is more capable of making holes in the wall. But when people want to hang a picture on the wall, they have other jobs that they have in mind. They're trying to minimize noise, right? So for example, I'm thinking here in Germany, you cannot cannot make holes in the walls on the weekends. Or when you walk out of your, like, you don't have to, like, you're probably going to have to clean all the mess if you make a hole in the wall afterwards. Or when you leave the apartment, if you're renting, you're going to have to plug all the holes again when you leave, right? So these are all jobs that the bit driller cannot do, right? So jobs are very contextual from that perspective, right? Let's say, when I want to hang a picture on the wall, the tape is probably a better product for that job, right? So from that perspective, the job to be done is not make holes in the wall, is minimize cleaning, minimize noise, minimize painting, right? So the aim of the job performer is not to use your product, but to get something done. And here's the kind of the change. Sometimes your product is on the way of getting them done, right? Let's say if they were able, like Bob Moesta, he talks about the cost of switching, right? So if you have a product that does the same thing that your product does, and there's these other jobs that people can do, and the cost and then the barrier to change is not that high, you are at risk of people switching. Right? So sometimes, let's say, people haven't switched it yet because, for example, your product is, the competitor is not much cheaper or doesn't do that much faster than yours. But at some point, it's like if you ignore all this, like what are these other jobs that people are trying to do, that's when the switch happens, right? So the way that we've been doing, using jobs to be done here is based on research. So one particular framework that we already start going into the stakeholder buy-in that I mentioned, we do a lot of these together, right? So like we don't have a research team that goes off, like we do have a research team that goes off and capturing insights, but when it comes to bringing that information into the team, there's not like here's a report, and then we go it. We try to do as much as possible with the team. So one way, like in the role that I have, I do a lot of facilitation, a lot of workshops. And one kind of workshop that we do is this kind of value proposition design, where we have the customer profile on the right side, and we have the product market fit on the left side. And visually, Osterweider, when he was creating this, he was brilliant, right? Because basically it's trying to fit a round peg on a square hole. When you try to do both at the same time, like discover what people want and solve it at the same time, most likely it's not going to fit, right? So you have to understand the customers first. So this is where things like what are they experiencing at Spain? What is annoying for them? Or what would they perceive as gain? Or what will make their life easier? So let's look at a couple examples here. By the way, it usually doesn't look that simple. If you go out and do customer interviews, you're going to have like dozens, maybe hundreds of kind of pains and gains. I'm just going to use two examples here, again, from learning. People find annoying that the courses take too long, or I find the material boring when I'm trying to take courses, right? Or I want to make sure that the courses I take, I finish all the courses I take, because like you probably, if you go to YouTube, I mean, I'm going to use YouTube as an analogy, right? You probably in your watch later list is probably growing, like things that you said that you're going to do and then you never do it. Same thing with learning, right? Sometimes let's say, oh, I'm going to take this course, especially if it's free. You just keep adding courses to your wish list and then you never go through it. Or, which is probably more, what most people are thinking in terms of like what a product should do in terms of learning is, I don't want to waste time on courses that are not going to progress my career, right? So just using this one insight as an example, so a job to be done would be something like this. When I'm choosing to take a course, I want to personalize learning paths to maximize my career advancement opportunities. So from a job to be done perspective, by the way, we're using the job story format here. From the job to be done perspective, people don't care about taking courses. What they want is to maximize their career advancement. If the courses is a way to do that, then great, right? So now that you generated, by the way, also, looks super oversimplified. It's not like most of the times it's not one job. A session like this will generate dozens of jobs. We're just picking one as an example. Now with that job, the team can brainstorm on like, what can we do to create something that is a good market fit, right? And this wouldn't be a tech talk if we didn't have AI-powered recommendations, right? So in this case, it's like if the customers want learning paths that maximize their career opportunities, can we offer like something like suggest courses that are going to maximize that, right? And this is not a theoretical exercise. SuccessFactors, we do have a product called Opportunity Marketplace. That's exactly what we did, right? Because we have learning product here, and we have performance management, and we have talent, like goals and stuff. If people went to their goals tool and said, my goal is to do this or do that, like what I mean goals is like your personal goals, right, as an employee. And the company has, let's say, we have our kind of, let's say, corporate development goals here. Then the tool, this opportunity marketplace, try to combine the two and say, okay, you, Stefan, you should, let's say, because you want to become an expert in AI, machine learning, and the corporate goal is for us to become the leader in Gen AI, these are the courses you should take, right? And we keep pushing these recommendations, right? Jobs to be done also comes with a prioritization framework, right? And again, as I said, not for the lack of ideas that people cannot innovate. Most of the times, it's like probably teams have too many ideas. So which ones probably makes more sense than others? Jobs to be done is also a good. I'm trying not to go into the details here because every time I show a table like this, people get really caught up on the formula. Like, what is a formula, right? I'm just going to use as an example. A lot of product prioritization methods by a feature, stack ranking, and so on. Most of them is like they have one dimension of importance, right? Let's say most of them is like a sequence, like which feature comes first. What I like about jobs to be done, and there are some other frameworks that have multiple dimensions, but what I like about jobs to be done is because like you use the customers to tell you how important they find an opportunity, but how satisfied they are with that opportunity. Because that other second dimension, then you can do things like this, right? So for example, look at number 4. So this is circular saw, right? So Bosch has a circular saw machine, and then they go out to the customers, interview them, and then they identify these jobs, right? Minimize the likelihood of getting debris in your eyes. Well, guess what? Super important, right? 9 out of 10. But what is the satisfaction? Like, how does either your tool or the competitors are doing? They're actually relatively well, 8.4, right? But on the other hand, look at the one below 5, right? Minimize the time it takes to make bevel adjustments. Let's say if people want to cut in an angle, how long does it take? The feature, one could argue that, yeah, it's not that important, 5.1, but every product in the market sucks. It's like 1 satisfaction. One could argue, if you use that approach, that probably there's a better way for us to differentiate ourselves if we focus on 5, because in terms of opportunities, almost as high as 4, right? By the way, this is all, I personally think, and I would love to hear your opinion after this, I personally think that this is probably the most systematic way of, let's say, you've probably seen that diagram, let's say, desirability, feasibility, and viability. In my mind, jobs to be done is probably the most systematic way of being relatively certain of the desirability of a feature, right? There are other methods, like, you still have to, at least this is like trying to understand the jobs, right? Say, how you execute on any of this, like, you still have to have like a way to test it and so on, right? So, and finally, how do we do this? And this is where I guess it gets to the last part of this talk, which is, okay, we have all these frameworks. How do we do this, and how we do this together, right? We've been running these workshops, like where we convert the user research insights into jobs together. And it doesn't look much different than kind of traditional design thinking, right? As like you still have the same techniques. You do clustering, you do synthesis. The difference is, at least the way that we have been applying, is the difference that we have been trying to do let's say in a job map format. And I have people ask, like, what is the difference between a job map and a customer journey, right? Customer journeys tend to be, especially if you're talking about, let's say, if you talk to the service design people, like the customer journeys tend to be like, how do people use your service, right? While jobs to be done is one step removed, is more like, what are the things that people are trying to get done, regardless if your product is there or not, right? So in this case here, a job map will be, the horizontal axis is the journey, from left to right is like the progression of, let's say, to get their job to, in SuccessFactors, we're trying to do a lot of, well, SAP as a whole, I guess. We're trying to support business processes, right? So the axis, the horizontal axis is like the business process that we are trying to support people to get done, right? This case here is time management, so we are letting people monitor and correct timesheets. The stuff on the top is the jobs. Like, why do people even need these business process steps? Then the team can come together and generate these ideas, right? Of like, these are almost like feature ideas, but without describing like the technology about how we're going to get these done. And I'm just going to use as an example here. So for example, the job is like when people are done with their work, they want to be reminded to log all their work, right? Maybe none of you have to kind of fill in, like if you work in consulting, or maybe if you work on some sort of like a time-based kind of job, then you have to log in, like you have to clock in time, like, oh, I used 2 hours on that project and 6 hours on that project. If you don't log these correctly, you might think that you're going to get, let's say, 100 euros in the end of the week, but then you get 80 because like you forgot to log in those 10 hours there, blah, blah, right? So for the company is an annoyance because like there's some 10 hours unaccounted for, but for you as an employee, you got pissed off, right? I say, man, like I'm gonna have to talk to my manager, I'm gonna have to add the correction, blah, blah, blah. And so the job is there, right? I say minimize the delays on the payment. Like, what are the things that we can do? Well, we could let people do corrections, like as the week approaches, can I remind people, right? First is like just something as simple as nudging the employees, right? Please don't forget to put your, like there's still 4 hours unaccounted for, please add there. But good. But sometimes it's like if you have a company, like I think yesterday I was talking to someone that works for Lufthansa, and they were saying like, well, a company like Lufthansa, there's like hundreds of people on the field. So your manager has like, a manager might have like 50 people on their crew. Like, is there a way that I can see like out of these 50, who are the people that are missing their timesheets? So, and then push a button and nudge all of them, right? So far, we've been doing this very, I'm proud to say that I think we've been doing that very consistently, because let's say the product teams kind of own the domain, they understand the customer pains. What I think and what I'm going to show you now is like what we are trying to do as like a two-way conversation with the owners of the goals, right? Because this is kind of the customer side of things. Then how do we bring this together as that theory about how do we match the, like what are the changes in human behavior that's going to create the business impact, right? So I'm just going to pick a line here, right? Let's say the manager, their job is to minimize timesheet late submissions, right? So you had the feature ideas there. Well, what the management wants is to be able to go to the customer and says, if we buy our product, we're going to reduce the total operating cost of your HR department by 5%. So then the product team can come and say, okay, I think we can contribute to that goal. And I think like Team Herbig, I think is going to talk about OKRs later today. Well, if that's the OKR, like if that's the O of the OKR, like what is the key result that we can do, right? Well, we can reduce the number of timesheet corrections per month by 25%. Well, how do we do that? Like how our theory or our hypothesis is like, these are the features that are going to contribute to that. Then release over release, we can compare, right? We released this feature. Did we drive that number? If we didn't drive that number, what can we do to adjust, right? So I think Thorsten just talked about like all the data that you collect. So this is kind of in my mind, this is kind of the beginning of that journey. You have to have the theory on what are the changes that you're going to have to make in your product so that we help customers achieve specific jobs to be done, and then get a way to measure them. Right? How do we know that we are right? If this is a theory, how do we know that we are right? And again, I just want to remind you, let's say, if we can't remember anything from this talk, just think about these three things, right? If we switch from this feature-centric to outcomes, you're going to create more like products that people can really resonate with them. And working with stakeholders is going to break the silos, and jobs to be done is going to be able to help you prioritize features. I didn't have time to cover in details a lot, but if you go to scan the QR code, you're going to see this article that I wrote that goes into the details, all of that. So thank you very much, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Itamar. Great talk. So yeah, we have some time for questions. Who has a question for Itamar? No one yet, so probably I do the icebreaker.
Okay.
I have one question. So when you, for SuccessFactors, this is a very big software suite, and there are a lot of jobs to be done for the customer there. What you do now with the upcoming of AI, because I can assume that for all the jobs you have in your software, all the jobs to be done, there is now probably the potential that AI could lead to a complete other experience for your customer. So, so how do you tackle that? You said that you do it in a very structured way. So have you already started to rebuild your roadmap and to evaluate different jobs to be done and look exactly how AI will impact that?
So that's actually a very good question. Someone asked me this the other day. I even wrote an article about like going behind the hype, beyond the hype. So yes, we started doing that. And actually, jobs to be done is actually pretty suitable in terms of helping people think about AI. And I think you said that you are skeptical, right, on AI. Jobs to be done can help skepticals like you and me, as in not get distracted by the shiny object and say, okay, if people are going to adopt AI, what are they going to use AI for, right? So we've been using jobs to be done to say, okay, some things that AI allows people to do are more on get rid of the boring tasks, right? So that means that AI can be something that is a lot on the automation or the optimization side. Other tasks are more suitable for things like help me understand something, right? Or explain to me this, right? So there's quite a lot of, we look at the jobs and then we start to classify, like now that we know the jobs, what part of these solution could be where does this part of the solution fits into that spectrum, right? Is it something that helps people automate their work? Is it something that helps them explain? Is this something that helps make them better decisions, right? So we're going to see a lot of enterprise software from now on where the software doesn't make a decision for you, but it gives you options, right? Let's say you could do this, and this, and then the AI becomes like a partner or like an assistant for you. Right?
And have you already started to implement some AI tools into your software? And just to get an idea, so if there is an idea in your product team to improve something with AI, so what's the least amount it would take that this gets into production to the end customer?
So the shortest answer to your question is like if it has AI on a name, there's like an 89% chance that it's going to make it into the backlog. So one example, like the most recent one is explain my pay statement, right? In the end of the month, but you get a pay statement that says we deducted this from your salary, we deducted that from your salary. A company like SAP, like not the software developer, but let's say not the company as a software development, but let's say SAP as an employer of like 100,000 people, we get an average of 40,000 tickets a year of people asking questions about their pay statement. We tried everything like FAQs. People have like office hours to explain, but then one of the things that we just releasing is the explain my pay statement. Like there's a chatbot that literally just explains like all of it, right? This is an example of something that came straight out of like someone had an idea and in a couple of releases we built it, right?
So it can be fast.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Itamar. So a big applause for Itamar again.